Napoleon isn't just one of the most famous people in history, he is also one of the most mismeasured. But how did we get it so wrong? Hi everyone, welcome to this channel. And today we are going to talk about Napoleon and his height. You see, stories about Napoleon's height have been circulating for centuries. One of the more popular ones says that he wasn't actually short like everyone thinks he was, but rather he was mismeasured because he was misidentified in the first place. The reason for the mix-up: his head was full of lice. When Napoleon died in exile on the island of Santa Elena in 1821, he was measured by an army doctor who noted that the great emperor was only 5 feet 2 inches tall. This measurement has been widely accepted ever since, even though it seems to contradict a number of eyewitness accounts from the Napoleonic era that claim he was much taller. Some put him at over 6 feet, so how could there be such a discrepancy? Well, you might be tempted to blame those pesky anti-Napoleon propaganda, but the truth is the problem might actually lie with the way that Napoleon was measured. It all starts with the Battle of Caronsebe's. Fought in 1796 during the French Revolutionary Wars, the battle was part of a larger conflict between France and the Habsburg army. And while the French were ultimately victorious, they suffered heavy losses, including the critically wounded General Louis Desaix. As the story goes, Napoleon himself carried the general off the battlefield and brought him to an army surgeon. When the surgeon examined Desaix, he discovered that he had been hit with a red-hot musket ball right above the left eye, which, as the surgeon noted, was a spot that was both insensible and devoid of hair. As a result, the ball had not caused any bleeding, and Desaix had not realized he had been injured until it was too late. After removing the ball, the surgeon sent the general back out to the battlefield, but within an hour, Desaix was dead. Now, this is where things start to get weird. You see, according to legend, after being informed of his comrade's death, Napoleon became enraged and demanded the surgeon be put to death for supposedly killing Desaix. Then, in a moment of inspiration or perhaps insanity, he ordered that the dead general's body be resurrected so that they could measure his head to determine if it had been misshapen by the musket ball. And fortunately for Desaix, this bizarre request was granted. Now, in the original account of these events, the surgeon who had operated on General Desaix claimed that Napoleon came to him later that night and told him to let him sleep in his bed. And when the emperor awoke, he found himself face to face with a corpse. After cutting into the dead man's bandages, Napoleon allegedly measured the general's head and compared it to his own. And what he found was a disturbing difference of 2 full inches. So, who was the real shorty then? Well, unfortunately for Napoleon, it seems to have been him. You see, the surgeon who cut open Desaix's head and then rebandaged him properly before returning him to his coffin was none other than Napoleon Bonaparte. And it turns out that Napoleon's measurements were a little off too, because in addition to being a military leader, he was also a trained artillery officer with a very particular set of skills that he would put to use whenever he got his hands on a cadaver. Historians believe that Napoleon used his knowledge of ballistics to estimate the size of heads, which meant that his measurements weren't always accurate. In fact, when he estimated the size of the recently deceased French actress Mademoiselle Mars by dropping small stones down her throat and feeling their vibrations in her skull, he ended up measuring her head circumference completely wrong. Now, given that Napoleon had a bit of a track record when it came to mismeasuring people's heads, it is possible that he was the one who messed up the measurement of his own noggin. If so, then he may not have been the short king we think he was. But the trouble is we will probably never know, because despite the fact that Napoleon was said to have kept detailed records of his scientific experiments, his notes on the matter have been lost to history. And without them, we can't be sure why he really chopped up the body of his friend and fellow general. Thanks for watching. For more tales of history's biggest mismeasurements, stay tuned.